Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the first talk show of DPS SGS School Dhaka. Today, Ms. Namamita Mumtaz, the head of marketing, and myself, Shalini Agrawala, the dean of activities, will be hosting the show. Today, the guest who's been invited is none other than Tom Foolery, the young poet who has written the poem The Great Realization and has touched the hearts of 28 million plus people across the globe. Before we start asking him something, I would like to tell you all a few lines about him. Robert's poem, The Great Realization, was released on YouTube on April 29 and has been viewed tens of millions of times. It has been translated independently into multiple languages, including Arabic, German, Spanish, French, Italian, and Russian. A simple rhyming tale read as a bedtime story, it takes on heavy themes: corporate greed, familiar alienation, the pandemic, and somehow comes up with a happy ending. He crafts us a vision for the future post COVID that is more attuned to our aspirations than the world we lived in pre lockdown. Others have urged Roberts to turn his virtual tale into a bound book that parents can read to their own children at bedtime. His agent at Creative Artists Agency plans to have that children's book published in the fall. As for the feature film he's been working on before the pandemic, coincidentally about a poet who finds sudden fame, well, he hopes that too will soon find a rapt audience. I think he has already found the rapt audience. So, Tom, would you like to say something before we start asking you questions?
No, well, thank you. That was a very, very lovely introduction, and I'm very, very happy to be here.
So, Tom, say a few lines about yourself. Our parents and our students are all listening to you.
um, I am living in London with my dad and my little brother and sister, Kai and Sora, who you may have seen appearing at the end of the video that I made.
Right, right, right.
And since the lockdown in the UK, I've been homeschooling them, and also I effectively lost my job, but I wasn't fired as such. It's just I was a freelancer, so I was making videos for corporations for their social media accounts, and it's not that I lost my job, but when the lockdown hit, nobody was there was suddenly all the work disappeared. So I came back to live in my dad's house. I came back to live in my dad's house, and I'm, was using this time to teach my brother and sister, but also to make these videos. And I'm really glad that the Great Realization, made it all the way to Bangladesh. I think this is wonderful.
Okay, Tom, the Great Realization. What inspired this story? You know, it has touched so many million people across the globe.
What inspired the story truly was, I'd say a feeling more than anything else. It was a feeling of deep uncertainty, and we're living in a very anxious time, and there was a lot of news that we were surrounded with that was deeply kind of unnerving, I suppose. And I felt very strongly that if there was any hopeful message to be found, then it would be a good idea to try and find it. And so I set myself that challenge, and I kept hearing this same phrase, I can't wait for things to return to normal. And I suppose the thing that got me thinking was, wouldn't it be nicer, instead of returning to normal, if after this deeply troubling moment, we were able to create something even better than we had before. And I thought that would be worth that would be
It
worth.
really gave us hope, Tom, after listening to that story of yours, the poem. It really gave us hope. Now, Miss Namamita
Okay.
will ask you the second question.
Okay, basically, these two lines. Why did it take a virus to bring people back together? Sometimes you have to get sick, my boy, before you start feeling better. So I just love these two
Yeah.
lines of your poem. How did you come up with these two lines?
Well, I was when I was thinking about those lines, I was really thinking about how you justify a moment of such suffering, because it
Mm.
it doesn't it doesn't feel good or right that a moment in time in which so many people are struggling,
Right.
financially, economically, personally, you know
Mentally, yeah,
mentally,
yeah,
it doesn't feel it's a difficult pill to swallow, to think that something like that has to happen for for people to have this moment of awakening. And I was imagining having to justify this to a little boy, to my little brother. And the wonderful thing about children is they ask the real questions. I think
yeah,
they will
right,
say
correct.
they will say things to you like,
Mm.
but why does that have to happen? Why can't
Mm.
people have these realizations independently of a moment like this? And I was thinking a lot about nature, and after every storm there is there is a
The
warm
rainbow,
sunny
like a
day.
kind, right? The
There is
rainbow
a
Yeah,
comes,
rainbow.
yes.
yeah, right.
After every illness there is a period of wellness. Even
Yeah,
after every war there is a period of peace. And part of me thinks that in nature there are these cycles. And in order to get to one part of the wheel, you have to go through the other part. And so the best answer I could come up with to this little boy saying, why would it take a virus to bring the people back together,
yeah,
is it's almost like a fairy tale answer. It doesn't really mean
yeah.
anything. It's the kind of thing we say to children, sometimes you have to get sick before you can start feeling better. It's kind of like, we don't always know how the world works, but that is how it
But it was
appears.
amazingly written, amazingly
Yes, that
written.
was the
Yeah,
lines that really touched us, right, Namamita,
yeah,
when we were going through the
correct.
poem? Yes.
Totally, totally. It just touched my
And
heart.
we just had to ask you these lines. Okay,
Hmm.
Tom, we all have a favorite bedtime stories, when we are young and we like listening to it every day. Like we call our parents. And which one was your favorite bedtime story?
My favorite bedtime story. I don't know if either of these people are very popular in Bangladesh. I think they could be, but I loved the work of Dr. Zeus,
Oh,
and
he's famous here.
yeah, and also Roald Dahl. I read many many stories from
Our
Roald
students
Dahl.
are reading a lot of books of Roald Dahl right
Exactly.
now. Yes.
Oh, well,
Yeah.
I'm so pleased, because they were the same. They were the same stories that I grew up with, and made me feel, made me question things, and have inspired wonderful imagination just before bedtime. Which
I
is
know
like a
we
good
all want to imagine something before we sleep, right?
Yeah, yeah.
mm,
So, Tom, just tell us about your family, like your mother, father, elder sister, everyone works at hospitals, as far as I know. So,
yeah.
tell us something about them, what they're doing or how they're doing, everything.
Um, they're doing very well. So my mother is a midwife, um, and even in a time like this, there are still babies being born, that need,
Yeah. Okay.
to be delivered. My
Okay.
sister is she's 4 years older than me. She's a new doctor, so she's working in a hospital in London treating COVID. Um,
Okay.
and my father is a professor of epidemiology, so the
Okay.
study of disease. And he, in his normal work, conducts randomized controlled
Mhm.
trials to try and find more effective treatments. But in fact, he works
Mhm.
with hospitals in Bangladesh quite frequently in his trials.
Oh,
He's
Oh,
he
that's
he,
great.
that's great.
Really.
Yeah.
he
Wow.
travels to Bangladesh quite often, and
Wow.
And however, in this moment, the UK, it's starting to change now, but the UK kind of drafted anyone with medical experience back into the hospitals. So
Okay.
so he's been doing that recently. But when things
Mhm.
start to ease, he's gonna go back to his research.
Okay, that's
Okay,
great.
Tom, let me ask you something. Everyone of your family is in the medical field, right? How come you didn't get into it and you got into writing poems?
True,
Uh,
true.
this
Yeah,
has
it's
been
exactly.
this has been a big question in our family for many years. So I was kind of initially supposed to do medicine, supposed to study medicine because almost sometimes when everyone else in the family does something and you're a child and you don't, you may not have figured out what you want to do yet. Sometimes the natural tendency is just to do what everyone else in the family does. So I was all set up on that path. I was studying the right subjects in school that would have enabled that, and yet I couldn't help myself from always feeling more exhilarated when I was studying literature and performance and you know I I remember the feeling that I had when you get to the stage in school where you have to pick four subjects that you're going to specialize in, and you almost have to leave all the other subjects behind. And I remember feeling so sad that I wasn't going to have my English lessons or my drama lessons or my music lessons or my art lessons or my history lessons anymore. Um, that I knew in this moment that the path that my the rest of my family has gone down wasn't the way that I was wanting to contribute to society. I thought that there's
You have done pretty well for
Yeah,
yourself now in
and
this
thank
well
God
field.
thank God
well
you
I've
started writing poetry because that's the way we got the great realization. It was amazing. Yeah.
well I've got to say it's very unnerving because if your interests lie in being a doctor or a lawyer or some of these professions, it's a very clear pathway for you as
Mm.
long as you pass the exams and as long as you do the necessary learning, you kind
Mm.
of are able to travel this steady pathway towards your eventual career. For artists, I think it's completely. The day I stepped out of university, I had no idea what I was going to do. Everyone in your family says to you, "How are you going to make a living?" To which you don't have the slightest idea. I ended up working in a bar,
Okay.
a late night bar in London, serving people drinks, thinking, "Have I made a big mistake?" But I think, I think in society, I think there's such a value to having artists and
You know what I
creative
read?
people.
I read about you somewhere. It is said that you used to read poems in the this thing all around London bars, and no one was interested. They were more interested in drinking. So that line really touched me. When only your great realization poem came up, people started
Mm.
recognizing you. Though you were writing such beautiful poems before too.
Yeah, exactly. The other poems also are wonderful poems.
The
Oh,
Inventor, which
thank
is
you.
The
recently
Inventor,
released,
yeah,
yes.
Inventor recently released. Yeah, it was
Thank you
amazing.
so much. Well, that's very, very kind. I feel like I feel a lot of people ask me why, how did you write The Great Realization? How did this happen? And my honest answer is I've written many poems, and you honestly, I feel from my perspective like I put the same amount of thought and care into each one of them, and then once you've done that, you just offer them to the world or to whoever's around you, and then it's not up to you anymore if that idea was useful. And I like to think if it was a useful idea, it will travel far. And maybe if it's not the right moment for this idea, then it won't, but it might one day, so I'm touched that the great realization traveled as far as it did, because it's such it's such humbling validation to think that you're behaving usefully in your society. I think so many of us want to feel that way, that just
Absolutely,
not
absolutely. We want to feel that way. Yeah.
not glorified, not like you're wonderful, just like you're contributing. And so
We were very surprised. Your previous poem was mostly based on politics and heavy stuff like that. And the great realization was such a soothing one. And you've put many realization in a very soft manner for your small little brothers and sisters in that. So what transformed that change from such heavy poems to this one?
Well, I still feel that way. Very, very truly. So what kind of happened was, when the world was open, and I could write about anything I wanted. I have very deeply held political views and feelings about injustice and fairness and lack of equality, or inequality, and I think they were the subjects that I felt a fire in my belly to write about and to perform. And I would get up in open mic nights in bars and perform these ideas. And sometimes just in the streets of Manchester, I would go with my friends and just start doing poems and hoping that small crowds would assemble. What happened when lockdown hit was, it was very interesting. The things available, you become constrained, and when you're constrained, you have to think about what is available to you, and in that moment, I had a house. I was in my family house. I had a camera because I work as a filmmaker, and so I needed a camera for my work, and I had a little brother and sister that I was with all day long. And so through that constraint, I thought, all I have are these certain things available to me, and I have two 7-year-olds, and it's impossible to work independently of them, because it's just me and them in the house. And so what would be better than to include them and to involve them and to make them part of the work, because then we can all create together. And so I think people's manner does change dramatically when you're around small children, and because I was not doing kind of biting political spoken word poetry, because I was with these two 7-year-olds, I thought, okay, well, what situations do we find ourselves in every day? I put them to bed with a story. So why don't I try and craft a poem that fits that scenario? And that
And
seems
they're also
like
aware for the current situation, what
yes,
everybody's
exactly.
facing, right?
And so they ask every day. They ask me questions about what's going on, because they see me as the as the person who's supposed to know what's going on, when so many of us don't know or understand what's going on.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So you do. So I changed my voice slightly to make it more soothing for a child. I tried to write simpler rhymes, because you want them to understand. And and since that poem has been released, it's not to say that I've left behind the style that I had before, but I feel like I have a natural curiosity as a storyteller, about different ways of communicating a story. And what happened with the Great Realization was so interesting to me, because I thought, here's a story that there are many different elements involved, and all of those elements put together made that story very accessible for a global audience. And I started thinking about what the elements were that made it accessible. And I thought, well, not everyone in the world has English as their first language. So maybe making the rhymes simpler is an advantage, because you make the ideas more accessible to other people. And I thought maybe, maybe when people are hearing, people, the news or people in their lives like yelling at them all day, maybe people want to hear a soothing voice.
Absolutely. I completely
For 4
agree,
minutes.
Tom. Tom, let me ask you one question. You're so young. Did you ever imagine that you would get this kind of a fame when you started writing poetry?
No. I quite the opposite. Quite the opposite. I imagined that I would be relatively unknown and struggling for the majority of my working life, and I was peaceful about that. I thought, okay, well, I know it sounds quite cheesy, but I would rather struggle with something that holds a lot of meaning for me, and then kind of have a relatively easy time doing something I don't enjoy at all. So yeah, I had very low expectations, and this has completely exceeded any expectation I could have, and like anything, it may just last for a short amount of time, and then the attention and the interest may go in other directions, and that's okay too, because no matter what, I feel blessed that I've been able to have this moment to share ideas with people, and that makes me feel very peaceful.
But you have so well said, Tom. Like till your poem is recognized, you'll be in in the starlight, and then suddenly it fade away if you don't continue giving something to the world, right? And you've accepted that fact so well, and it's really touching that you expect accepting things in life the way it flows, right? The what do you call it? What do you say? Really, you're so down to earth, humble still with all this fame. So that's very nice. It shows what kind of person you are.
Totally.
Oh,
Yeah.
thank you. I think it's good. It's I think it's a very good strategy not to fall in love with yourself. Because I know that when I see other people who don't hold themselves with a certain level of grace, I feel unattracted to listen to their message, because I think you've been consumed by narcissism, and that doesn't interest me. And so it's not easy. It's very there's a constant temptation in human beings, I think, to to hear nice things about themselves, and to believe those things. I think we're all very very susceptible to
Absolutely
that
correct.
temptation, but it's something that I think it's worth resisting if that's possible.
Now maybe go ahead asking
Yeah.
question about the
So,
school, the last this
yeah. No, actually, I had another question for him, actually. So, your story is considered as the greatest fairy tale of our times. How you feel to it, actually?
Oh, blimey, who said that?
Actually, we
It
all
is,
say that.
yeah, it is written all over. The
It's
greatest
written
fairy
all
tale
over.
of
We
this
all say that.
generation.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Well, wow. Ultimately, I all my life I have been completely um, in the trance of powerful stories. I think powerful stories are one of the most exciting things in the world. It's why I so much look forward to reading a new book, or going to the theater, or going to the cinema, or I think stories are such a a fuel for existing and behaving responsibly in the world. We listen to stories to form our own opinions and to decide what courses of action we think are wise and what courses of action we think are kind of dishonorable, without having to make those mistakes ourselves, because we get to, we get to see it play out in stories. And I think that I know that in my life I get so much meaning and comfort from stories, and all I have ever really wanted to do was to offer my own, to the landscape of ideas and dreams, and the idea that potentially I could have written a fairy tale that will be experienced by many people is something
And
that
Tom, I
I'm very
feel that
grateful for.
I feel with a happy ending, everyone wants to sleep with a smile on their face, especially the little ones, right? So it just puts a smile. If you see a tragic scene ending of the story, tragic ending to a story or something, you're not very happy and it disturbs your sleep. But I think happy ending just puts a smile on your face and you sleep in peace, right? What do you think about that?
I think I completely agree. I think there is space in our world for stories of hope, and stories of that are maybe slightly sadder or darker. Personally, I think that if the world is going through a moment such as this one, where there is so much uncertainty and anxiety and so much fear, then I think the antidote to fear is hope. And so the story that I was interested in writing was one that would give people hope, and in order to do that, you need to suggest that there could be a moment that's better than this one that's coming. Because if you don't give people that in your story, then it can be quite unkind to suggest to people it won't get better. Like, who would want to believe that it
Right,
won't get
absolutely,
better?
yes, completely.
We need to believe that any difficulties we're facing now, and there are so many difficulties we're facing now, we have to believe that they're temporary, because that's the only way you can get out of bed in the morning.
Absolutely, you're absolutely correct.
So, Tom, I think so many students already submitted their questions for you. So, I think we should start it. Miss Shalini got the
I
question.
know.
Can you
They are
ask the
all
questions?
waiting,
Yeah,
for
yeah.
their
Ask the questions
answers.
on behalf of
Okay.
the students, please.
Okay, I'm going to mention the name of the child, the grade,
Yeah,
and then I'm
yeah.
going to ask the question. Okay. It's
Okay.
Shaila from grade 5. Okay. She wanted to ask you, which was the first poem written by you? Why did you want to become a poet?
Shyla from grade 5, thank you for your question. The first poem I ever wrote was called Two Mice, and I wrote it when I was in school for an evening. It was an evening being held by the school where students could get up and perform to the parents of the children from the school. And I wanted to perform, but I can't sing, I can't dance, and
Okay.
I can't play an instrument. And I thought, okay, but I had this urge to get up and do something. And so I sat down with pen and paper, and I wrote a story that rhymed, which is effectively all of my poems are just
So
stories
how
that
old
rhyme.
were you that time?
Must have been about 12, I think.
Oh my God,
12 or
it's so
12 or
early
13.
age. Wow, that's amazing.
Well,
Okay,
I mean, you don't know
another
how good the poem
question.
is.
Mm.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
another question is from Kashvi Agarwala, grade 9. Okay, she wants to ask you, why did you choose the name Tom Foolery when your actual name is Thomas Roberts?
Thank you for that question. I've always admired artists who I think there's something really precious about a personal life. I really do. I think it's something that I'm very, you know, I never expected for a single moment that I would have this much attention. But if ever that was going to happen, I'm really interested in having a kind of a working a working almost character. It can be a character that shares my beliefs and my views and my words and my thoughts, but still a character who I will put into the world when I want to share with the world. But then when I want to be myself with my friends, with my family, you know, with the people I love, I don't I don't necessarily think that celebrity culture where people feel inclined to share every element of their life with the rest of the world, that's not something that appeals to me at all. To be completely honest, I think there's something wonderful about having a relationship with the public, but I also think there's something wonderful about
Very well answered, you know.
intimacy.
Yeah.
You know,
And we agreed,
so
Amita, we agreed to it, right?
Totally.
yeah. So I created that name as a means of saying when I'm willing to share, that's who I am, and my own name is for when I'm in my life.
Wonderful answer.
Okay, I'm going to go for the next question. Vihanga from grade 5. How many poems have you written up till now?
Oh gosh. Thank you for your question. The truthful answer is I don't know. I've written many. It's you see, it's not like when you're a filmmaker and you make films and it takes 2 years to make a film, and so you can say I've made 8 films in my life. It's like with these poems, sometimes so many poems in my notebooks are half written. You know, I honestly I have hundreds of poems where maybe I've only written 4 or 5 lines and a title, and you know, and so many of them. One day I'll be in the right frame of mind and I'll come back to that particular one, and maybe I'll finish it, and maybe there are some that will never be finished. But truly,
Haven't you thought of
many.
publishing all your poems in a book? Like only the Great Realization is
Yeah.
coming as a book right now. We have got like, you know, pre-booking orders for it, right? From your
Well, yeah.
agent.
Well,
Right.
I would love to do this, and I hope to do this. You you must remember that there was no publisher in the world that would have had any interest in publishing my poems until 2 months ago. So before The Great Realization came out, I would have loved to publish my poems in books, but I don't think anyone would have published them, and I don't think anyone would have read them. But you know, now maybe people might be interested to read some more of my poems, and so this is definitely something that I'd be happy to do.
But you know, you're such an honest person. You're just talking freely and honestly, like, you know, just before the fame. That's very nice to know that, you know, I'm just repeating it again and again, Tom, for you. Okay, Tom. Avni from grade 8, she wants to ask you, who is your biggest inspiration?
Oh, Avni, I have many. I have many. I have many people that I admire very greatly. Not all, many of them are not poets at all. They do completely different things. There is one person who is potentially unexpected. So I'm a big follower of football. I always have since I was a little boy. I support Liverpool Football Club, which is in this moment the most successful team in the United Kingdom, but
Yes.
hasn't been that way, you know, always. Anyway, their manager is a man called Jurgen Klopp, and he's a German man who's been at the club for 4 years. And I watch every press conference he does because I think he is such a phenomenal public speaker, and he's got such wonderful insights on life, and he's got so much wisdom. The one short story that I'll tell you, which sums up why this man is an idol for me, is in his first ever press conference for the football club. he was asked, Liverpool haven't won a title in 30 years. You know, do you think you're going to come in and achieve that? You know, are you the special one? And he kind of sat back in his chair and he said, I'm not the special one. I'm the normal one. Let's get to work. and you know, and just last week, Liverpool won their first Premiership title for 30 years. And what I love about this gentleman in particular, but there are so many people, is I think it's so easy to, when you have a platform, to, you know, profess that you can do things that other people can't do and that you are special. And I think there's something so beautiful about saying, I'm just like you, but I'm going to get to work and I'm going to do the best I can, and we'll see what happens. And so I could have spoken about many people, but in this moment when this question came to me, this is who I thought about.
Okay, let me ask you: haven't you written any poem on football then?
I have written poems on football. I just haven't released them publicly, but I think I could do.
You should,
Not
because
many.
you'll get many fans for it, you know.
Maybe they'll give me a ticket to the games.
Okay, now Akithma from grade 8. Okay, she wants to ask you, why haven't you written stories? Why only poem?
Well, I've written a film, as you alluded to in
Yes.
the lovely introduction that you gave me. I think stories, I mean, the poems are stories, and the film is a story, and The Great Realization is a story. It's just a story that's told in 4 minutes. If you're talking about like novels, you know, why haven't I ever you know, had the inclination to write books like that? It's because so much of my interest lies in the telling of the story. So with the poems, I put as much thought and energy into how I'm going to read them as I do into writing them. And with a film, you know, I put a lot of time and thought into writing the film, but then the same amount of love into executing the film.
Right.
With novels, I feel like you get to really do the writing part, but then you give it away to someone else, and they will interpret it. You know, you're not there to perform it, and I think that suits some people's personalities very nicely. But I've got so much interest in performing that I prefer mediums where I can be the storyteller as well as the writer.
Very well answered. Very well answered. I think Itma will be very happy with that answer.
Yeah, right. So actually, Tom, now I would like you to have some advice for our students, like what should they imagine or what points they should consider while writing a poem. Give some advice for our students, and I also would like you to share some lines for our school as well. Yeah.
Well, truthfully, I think I could never tell you what to write about, because ultimately what we write about comes from our hearts, and it comes from, you know, the feelings that we have and the things that are important to us. And what's wonderful is if you share what's important to you, there's a very good chance that it's important to someone else as well, and they will be so glad to have to have received that message. I think the best advice that I could give to anyone really is to speak honestly, and to not be afraid of, you know, your own feelings, because, you know, ultimately I think, have you ever watched a politician speak and it sounds like they're reading from a script?
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's true.
Yes.
Totally. Yeah.
Somebody else writes their speeches for them.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
When I see that, I have this strange feeling. I think you don't believe in what you're saying enough to trust yourself to say it. You know, you
Yeah,
have to
correct.
prepare. Now,
Yeah.
my feeling is if you speak only the things that you believe, no one will ever catch you out, because you can formulate that sentence in a million different ways, but you'll be saying the same thing because you'll be speaking, truthfully about what you believe. And I don't think you can ever go wrong if you speak about what you believe, because you know you can have people that disagree with you. There are many people who don't share my beliefs, and they make that known to me, and that's okay. That's the point. That's the point of sharing your ideas
Yeah, right.
to
Everybody
find
has their own global perspective or perspective
Yeah,
about a different issue.
ex-
Absolutely.
exactly. And
sure.
in order to get anywhere, in order for there to be any progress, we need to listen to those that don't agree with our beliefs, and you know through the use of language, see if our arguments are compelling enough to bring them into believing what we believe, or to see if their arguments are compelling enough so that you will change your mind. The thing that I think doesn't work is writing what you think someone would like to hear, but that is not something you believe. I don't think that works. I don't, because there are so many different people that you cannot please
Right.
everybody at any one time. So the best you can possibly do is articulate what you believe, and that would be the advice that I would give.
That's
Okay,
very
very,
well,
very,
Raya. Very nicely
very,
explained, right?
yeah, very nicely
Yes.
explained. Thank you for the advice. So, do you want to share some of your thoughts or something for our school,
School,
DPSSA
yes.
school, please?
Well, I'm very hopeful that I can visit your school one day,
Please, we will
Please,
love,
yeah,
we will love that.
yeah.
Please.
because I do many of these, like we're doing now, these virtual talks with schools, and I'm so happy to do them. Truly, I think I remember when I was in school and someone would come in to speak, at my school, and
Mm-hmm.
I remember those people that did that. This is now 20 years later in my life, and I still remember them, and I still remember, the feeling I had when I was young and I was learning and I was looking for answers, and someone would come in and share their experience with me, and I just remember how meaningful that was to me. And so the idea that anyone would want me to speak in their school is still very is still very surprising to me. But as long as people want me to come in and speak, I gladly will. But I think it's such a shame that I can't, you know, um, you know, be able to, see your building and all of
Mhm.
your faces, and we're stuck behind these screens. So maybe
That's
one
true.
day the situation will exist where that doesn't have to be the case. But until then, I just hope that you work hard, and you push yourself in the areas that interest you, and hopefully you share your thoughts and feelings, and that there will be people who will gratefully receive them.
So wonderful,
Yes.
wonderful line.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Yeah, thank
Yes.
you, Tom. So we've come to the at the end of our session actually. So, dear all, like Tom, let's look at the bright side always. We are in isolation during this pandemic, but we are connected through this isolation. And thank you, Tom, for giving us this great realization. It was an amazing session with you, and I want to thank you on behalf of our school for coming online for this session and spending time with us. And please convey my thanks to Alex as well,
Alex,
because
yes.
he actually, because of him it happened, this session
Mm.
happened. So thank you both of you, and so stay safe and stay blessed, and please stay connected with GPS, and I hope that very soon we'll meet, and this situation will be recover soon. So
Yeah, me
uh,
too.
yeah, exactly.
Thank
Thank
you
you,
so
Tom.
much, Tom.
Thank
Yes,
you
it was
so
very
much.
nice talking, and
Yeah,
you are an inspiration to our young budding poets, in Bangladesh. and our
Yeah.
children will be very excited. And if I get any more messages, I'll definitely mail it to you, Tom.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Yes.
Take
Thank
care,
you.
everybody.
Thank you. A round of
Thank you. Bye
applause. Thank
bye.
you. Bye,
Yes.
Tom. Bye. Thanks.